All right. Welcome everyone. I'll let you guys fill up your seats as we prepare for another conversation on race and police, hosted by CSUSB's File Library. I guess I can start by introducing myself. I am your host, Marlo Brooks, senior studying English here at California State University of San Bernardino in the College of Arts and Letters. And I'm joined by my co-host, Stan Futch, Westside Action Group's president. Welcome, Stan.
Glad to be back. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to have you back. And also, this week's topic, we'll be speaking on guerrilla warfare. So we'll be talking about from the streets to the courtroom. We have an activist that's been doing numbers in the streets, and we're going to talk about that soon. She's going to be introduced by her trial lawyer, and this is a very interesting young man as well. So I can't wait till you guys dig into the show today. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to first say, on behalf of CSUSB and on behalf of us here at the Conversations on Policing, on Race and Policing, we want to say happy holidays to you all. We want to say safe travels. We want to say wear your mask. We want to say enjoy the family time, enjoy what it means to be thankful for. 2020 can look sketchy, but we have plenty to be thankful for in this year. Trust me on that. So always remember what this holiday means to you, and just reach into those things as you travel to see your family, as you take that rest you so needed from work, that rest you so needed from studies, those and so on. So as we do every week, we start off by paying homage to the land on which CSUSB sits on. And it goes, we recognize that California State University of San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the CSUSB community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold CSUSB more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. So we thank you. And now at this time, I would like to turn things over to our very own Mary Tech Sarah with some updated news, some good news going on across the nation. Welcome, Mary.
I'm coming. Hi. Thank you, Marlo. I appreciate it. Thank you for that great introduction. I am very, very excited today to have one of our former students, one of our own actually, giving us laying some wisdom on us today, along with his guest, Tianna. But right now, we always have a section of the program called Good News. We want to sort of track the progress of what is happening across the country and even across the world in terms of policing and race. And there have been several items this past couple of weeks that we wanted to bring to your attention. Number one, it's very encouraging to see so many progressive DAs being elected across the country, including Los Angeles and San Francisco. And these progressive DAs, unlike in the past, are not running on a law and order platform as they have in the past, simply because that doesn't work. We're filling up prisons, and I think prosecutors' offices are seeing, of course, Curtis will let us know that not all of them are feeling that way, but some are certainly seeing that just arresting people, putting them away, locking them up for life is simply not working. So we're very, very encouraged by that. The city of San Francisco, we hear is actually prosecuting for the first time in its history. First time in its history. Let that sink in for a second. Prosecuting a law enforcement officer for murder. And we are very, very encouraged by that. But imagine, murder in the line of duty, which is very, very difficult to do because of qualified immunity and all of those other fine print items that prevent officers from being prosecuted. But we're very, very encouraged by that. Even at the national level, the new director of Homeland Security that President-elect Biden has nominated is a Cuban-American immigrant. And Biden feels like he will be more sensitive to things that are going on in the immigrant community, including the 500 and some children who were separated from their parents as a result of Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and all that. This may seem a stretch, but my last item has to do with COVID, with the enforcing of rules about wearing masks, because I think those of us who believe in science believe that the only way we're going to really stop this very quickly is by wearing masks. So there was a party in Brooklyn a couple of weeks ago that had 1,500 people in attendance, and the city of New York actually fined the venue $15,000. So we think that's encouraging in terms of really stopping the spread of this disease. Unfortunately, we have to use law enforcement for that. But that's all the good news I have now, and I'll be reporting, or Yvette will be reporting next week. And so now for the meat of the program, which is my former student, and I take credit for everything that he has done from the time he graduated until now. Curtis Briggs is a graduate of CSUSB in the Department of Sociology. He's a sociologist. I've always felt like sociology is a good start for the practice of law, and maybe Curtis can talk about that a little bit, but I'm not going to talk anymore. And I'm very, very proud to introduce Curtis Briggs to our audience. Thank you, Curtis.
Thank you, Dr. Texera. What an amazing time in American history to be a part of a civil rights movement that's working. And we're just an extension of hundreds of years of hard work on behalf of people who have sacrificed. So it's a pleasure to be here. As Dr. Texera said, I'm a criminal defense, and I'm a trial attorney, and I'm a civil rights attorney. It's my honor, and I'll introduce Tianna more formally in a few moments, or actually probably about 5-6 more minutes, but it's my honor to represent Tianna. She is a very special young woman, and she's been called by this movement, and she's answered. And so it's a pleasure to be here. This is historic, I think, in a sense that you will never see, or rarely, if ever, a criminal defense attorney and somebody who's actively being prosecuted share the stage at the same time, willing to speak candidly and honestly about what's going on with strategy, what's going on with the entire case. And we're here to do that for you today. In 2007, about 13 years ago, I was driving my mom's minivan, a gray Chrysler Town and Country with about 100,000 miles on it, up the 15 freeway. And on my left is the beautiful mountain range, the Cucamonga Peak, Wrightwood, a dusting of snow. It was a clear, cold day. I was probably playing Lil Wayne because the acoustics were so good in my mom's minivan. And I was on my way to my first semester at Cal State University, San Bernardino. The reason I was in my mom's minivan is because about 5 years prior, I had lost everything. I was an IV drug user. I was heavily involved and affiliated with Chicano gang members on the streets in the Inland Empire. And I had devoted myself, unfortunately, to a life of crime. And I was prosecuted in Rancho Cucamonga. I was convicted of a felony in Rancho Cucamonga. And I was confused because everybody that was of color that I associated with went to prison. And I didn't. And I didn't understand what the phenomena was that happened to me. I didn't understand what made me special. I didn't understand why I got these breaks. I wanted to understand more. So I decided to go into sociology for that sole reason. I wanted to understand how institutions interact with society, because there were some things I just didn't get. And I sat in class right where you're sitting now, except you're in a virtual class. And I listened to some amazing professors, and one professor was an activist, was charismatic, was a leader. And I was sitting in a classroom full of mostly women of color. And I learned from this professor what white privilege was. I learned what privilege was. And this professor told me that I can use my privilege to help others who may not have the same opportunities. And that professor was Dr. Texera. I owe a lot to Dr. Texera. I owe a lot to the sociology department. I owe a lot to Cal State University, San Bernardino. If I can do it, you can do it. You have all the tools there you need. So here I am. I represent Tianna in a town called San Luis Obispo, which is, we call it SLO for short. I'm going to give you a couple details so that you understand a few videos that we're going to play you. So I want you to understand who the players are and the terms that I use. SLO is a very, very conservative county. Everything that Dr. Texera said that we're claiming victory over in the current elections with progressive DAs, SLO is not. Dan Dow is the elected DA there, and he is a religious zealot with no toleration for Black Lives Matter or for civil rights. The police chief in San Luis Obispo, her name is Deanna Cantrell. And Tianna, who will speak to you today, she is an effective voice in the Black Lives Matter civil rights movement. And she scared this community. She scared the institution. She scared the cops, because she was asking for justice for George Floyd and many, many others. And she was able to get hundreds of people out there. And they decided to retaliate against Tianna for her effectiveness at what she was doing. They fabricated charges against her. They misconstrued things. They tampered with evidence. And they tried to charge her with multiple felonies. Many attorneys, including myself, got involved. And we were able to prevent the felonies, but it was misdemeanors that she's now facing. So I'm going to show you a video just so you can get an idea of what it looks like for me to use my privilege to help the cause. I'm actually going to show you two videos. One's like about a minute and the other one's about 3 minutes. And I have to be able to navigate Zoom. Is that working?
Yes.
We're here for 3 reasons today. One, to respectfully ask Dan Dow to reject these charges as they've been.
Can you raise the volume to your video?
It's maximum right now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Not just for moral reasons, but because these charges are false. 2, we're calling for the immediate termination of Deanna Cantrell, police chief of SLO. 3, I'm asking the citizens of SLO, keep an open mind, because you're called for this jury. You're gonna need to hear the real facts, not what Deanna Cantrell put out in the media. Okay, so just to let everybody know, the police chief resigned the following day. And then let's move to the next video. When we walked in today, all of you were here cheering. When we walked in today, we won this battle today. We won this battle with hundreds of people here in support of this cause. And the biggest person we have today is the end. Dan Dow will do more for the civil rights movement than any of us ever could. Dan Dow wants to send all of these young men and women that he's charging with crimes to law school on free ride, law school, grad school, or anywhere they want on free rides. Because that's how people like this that are persecuted wrongly in pursuit of civil rights, that's how they're rewarded by higher institutions. Dan Dow doesn't know that. Church, speak the truth. There's a much bigger picture here. He's playing checkers and we're playing chess. Our job is to advance the civil rights movement. Our job is to make this world a better place. Our job, especially the attorneys, is to make sure these young men and women are in a better place than when this case started, by the time we get done. And our job as a community is to completely derail Dan Dow's political career right here. Can you repeat that, please? Can you please repeat that? Our job as a community is to completely derail Dan Dow's political career right here, right now. And Dan Dow has given us everything we need to do it. Let's just recap here what's happened on this case. We know the charges are bogus. The police chief just up and left out of town, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with a fairly easy job. She couldn't run fast enough because she was smart. She saw this coming. She knew what she started. Now we're learning in the evidence as it's turned over that district attorney investigators are lying, they're committing perjury. So who are the real criminals? Dan Dow is a felon. Wait. Can you say that one more time, please? I need to hear that one more time. Dan Dow is a felon. Dan Dow is a Dan Dow is a Okay, so that kind of gives everybody an idea of how I use my opportunities and my privilege to help the civil rights movement. And once Tianna introduces herself a little bit, she's going to introduce herself quickly, show you a video of herself so you can get an idea of how powerful she is. And then she's going to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to be prosecuted as a civil rights leader. And then we're going to tie this into some specific focus, and then we're going to take it from there. So it's my honor to turn the microphone over to Tianna at this time.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm really excited to have this opportunity. I'm a CSU student myself, so I'm like really honored. My name is Tianna Arata. I'm 20 years old. I'm an activist. I'm an organizer. I'm a daughter. I'm very versatile. I'm multifaceted. I'm a student. I'm an athlete and so much more. But most importantly, I am being prosecuted for my beliefs. I started my activism work and my organizing in Portland when I was 14 years old, and with some great mentors. They really helped me step into my own abilities and capabilities. And now I'm fighting the repercussions of trying to stand up for my own rights and the rights of others who we desperately need it. I get a little awkward sometimes, especially like when I'm not face to face or I can't see like who I'm talking to, but I'll show you guys some videos that can kind of paint somewhat of a picture of me. Nice. Being Black in America, being a minority in America, being brown, gay, queer, trans. Every day we deal with counter protesters. Every day. We are stronger and we are more resilient.
My grandma was in town a couple weeks ago for my birthday. I actually wasn't home. It was about 10 at night. Some bigots found out where I lived. I still don't know who it was. And they were outside my house, purposely targeting me and my family, screaming, "Fucking niggers. Who the fuck do you think you are, you fucking niggers?" Taking pictures with the mayor and shit. Who the fuck, and continued to just spew bullshit to try and make me and my family scared. My grandma grew up in Chicago. She told me she's about, what, 60-something? 60-something. It literally triggered her PTSD to when she used to be a child, and the police would harass 9-year-old boys in the hood. So I want y'all to know that shit still hasn't stopped. People are still doing the same. People's mindsets have not changed. You might think, oh, the old racist people, oh, they're dying out. No, they push their ideology onto their children. They push their ideology onto young folks. I need you to understand it. It's not something that totally dies out. It finds new forms every day. Every day. It is continuously evolving because the system we have in this country is built.
Am I back? Okay, so that is me. That is a clip. The first clip was from my press conference when we were still trying to get the DA's office to drop the charges. And the next was actually from the day I was arrested. I'm going to talk a little bit about my life basically since I've been arrested. This has been the most difficult thing that I've ever had to deal with. And I've grown up in poverty. I've grown up moving houses all the time. Like, I've had so many circumstances, but at the end of the day, this is what bothers me the most. The night I was arrested, I was released probably about 2, 3 in the morning. And ever since then, everything had completely changed. I was a target in San Luis Obispo and SLO. As you all know, it's a super conservative town. And after that first night, I was forced to leave my town. I was chased out of town. I was getting insane death threats. People continued to show up at my house. People continued to try to intimidate me. And I was forced to be homeless for 3.5 months. I was living out of my car with my mom, constantly traveling up and down the state of California, being followed by undercover police. I remember I was in San Francisco visiting my uncle, and I was followed by the cops for 3 days. And San Francisco is 4 hours away from SLO. They chose to make my case so high profile after I'm simply fighting for civil rights, as Black people have to do generation after generation, which is already immensely difficult because you come in as youth and you come in as trying to set the standard, and you are burdened with the work of liberation for everybody, and you're not, you can't expect one generation to liberate everyone. But through this prosecution, it has been incredibly difficult. I truly believe I was arrested and picked because the police chief of SLO, the former police chief, personally targeted me because her ego was upset after the protest I had organized. My life, it continues to remain unstable. I Oh, I'm finally getting more settled in a new place. I don't like to state where I live because I'm still under surveillance. My phone is tapped. I had to get a second phone. I had to get a burner because my old phone was tapped, and here I am again. I'm constantly worrying. I have enormous amounts of PTSD from my arrest. They had 6 cops, 6 officers arrest me and drag me to the police car. I wasn't resisting. I didn't say anything. It was just a means of intimidation, and you see this all the time. So this is really emotional for me, and I don't always like to talk about it because I am trying to cope and I'm trying to heal, but I'm also trying to share my experiences with other people, especially youth and especially other students, because it's so important to know that we are not alone in this fight. We have people from numerous different generations. We have Curtis, we have Professor Teixeira, excuse me if I said that wrong. Sorry,
Tianna, I don't mean to interrupt you. There's kind of a clicking when you're talking, so I don't know if that's coming from you or somebody that's unmuted, but is there anything around the microphone that might be causing that?
No.
Okay.
Not on my end either, but I just want to encourage you, Tianna. You're doing great. You're doing great. So just take a deep breath and give us some more knowledge.
So, I mean, that's kind of what my life has been like, being prosecuted for this cause. And honestly, it's very hard for me to say, but I wouldn't have it another way, because my arrest and the targeting of social justice leaders and because as much as people are symbolized as leaders, at the end of the day, we are just humans fighting for essential rights. My arrest and my case of 13 charges has shown me I needed to do this. I needed to be in the streets that day. I need to continue to further my activism, my organizing, my work. I need to continue to read and educate myself and realize that this is an ever evolving, ever changing system. And I mean, my goal is really to heal and to bring other people into their spaces to heal and to do work to help the most marginalized, most oppressed people, because if we can't liberate them, then we're not truly doing the work of liberation. I mean, it's an interesting situation for me to be in. I just turned 20 this summer, and I never expected to have this sort of like spotlight or opportunity to be able to talk about my experiences and why I do this, but I'm definitely grateful, and I know that my work is never done, no matter what the world looks like. So I'm just, I'm here to share that with y'all.
Can you tell us a little bit about your original charges and your how your activism got started and what your goals are?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with my activism and my organizing work. I first attended like this massive protest when I was 14, and I was living in Portland, Oregon. It was my freshman year of high school. We hadn't even started school yet, so I was basically fresh out of 8th grade. And it was a Black Lives Matter protest. And I had done my own research, and I had learned about queer liberation and trans liberation somewhat before. And of course, I'm a Black woman, so I have dealt with these experiences my entire life. But at that protest, it was such a transformative moment in my life. I, from there, was introduced to other organizers of a collective called Don't Shoot PDX. And we did a range of things. We helped feed the homeless, we protested, we had sit-ins at the mayor's house, we had our meetings on how to educate ourselves and others and how to interact with people, especially knowing that people don't like to hear the terms Black Lives Matter. And so we would always constantly try and brainstorm how we can be most effective. I was speaking at panels with the mayor. I was going to the police board of commissioners meetings, doing my best to hold them accountable as a 14-year-old girl. And at the age of 16, I had moved to San Luis Obispo, and it was culture shock to me because SLO is a town of 40,000 people. 20,000 of those people are students at the university or students at the community college. So it's a very young base, but it is still overwhelmingly white. I think it's 70% white and only 2% Black. And I really struggled to find any type of community in SLO. I tried joining BSUs and I started running track again. And I just was like, where are the Black people? Honestly, like, where can I find my community? There was a few protests leading up to this year, 2020. But in late May, after George Floyd was murdered, and with the heightened attention on Breonna Taylor, a group of, I think, 15 friends of mine, we organized a protest and marched through downtown. And ever since then, it started blossoming and transforming, and so many young people started getting involved. And it was such a beautiful thing. And I was so strapped for time this summer. I mean, after my arrest, it took away somewhat of my ability to be able to organize. But from May till July 21st, I was waking up every morning, working out if I had time. And then we had all these different group chats and all these different communities. And we're like, okay, what are we doing? What are we planning for this week? What is our focus? Who are we trying to honor? We would have vigils and protests, fundraising events, like bake sales and garden sales, just trying to care for our community. And now I'm here.
Yeah, you're doing fine. I can summarize kind of the charges. There was a protest. These protests that Tianna was a part of were all peaceful protests. That was part of the deal for them. However, there was a protest in question. There was essentially there was a car that tried to run over, actually did run over a protester. Somebody who we don't necessarily know who broke that car window out with a skateboard in an effort to stop the car, because the car had a protester on its hood. There was another incident kind of like that at another place. These didn't happen necessarily where Tianna could see it. And Tianna was on Instagram Live, right? So she had a friend had her phone and was filming her, and Tianna was chanting "fuck the police," amongst other things, also singing and dancing. And it was also very joyous. It was actually very joyous. Even the "fuck the police" was done in a way that was actually very pleasant to hear. And unless you're a police officer, I guess. And somebody showed Tianna's phone and said that, hey, the police chief's texting you, because they had a communication. And somebody broke out a window in a car, and the police chief's upset. And Tianna, on her Instagram Live, because it's still feeding and the police are watching it, she says, "Fuck Deanna." And suddenly these incidents that happen where cars tried to run into protesters and these cars did things wrong, suddenly those got flipped onto Tianna, and somehow they tried to charge her with felony vandalism, false imprisonment, inciting a riot. I mean, all this stuff that was really just, it was BS. It didn't even make the cut to the DA's office, but that's kind of how it started. And when Tianna was arrested, she asked what she was arrested for, and they said, "We don't know yet." So that just kind of gives you a flavor of what's going on. So I think that's everything that you asked. So I want to be very specific. Tianna and I are both here because we want to do two things. We want to inspire you and we want to empower you. And it doesn't matter to us in what ways or to what extent. We want to move the dial a little bit. However, there is a specific way we would like to do that. And this is important. This is never talked about. This is never part of the public narrative of the civil rights movement. And here it goes. The most underutilized utilized tool in the civil rights movement is jury service. The most underutilized tool to advance the civil rights movement is jury service. That is because law enforcement, and not all law enforcement, but thousands and thousands of people across this country were retaliated against for speaking out against police violence. Black Lives Matter protesters all over the country were arrested on charges just like Tianna's, fake charges. Some of them may be even true. Some people, might have started things on fire because they're upset that people are dying at the hands of police and they want change. Law enforcement retaliated, and that means these people are being prosecuted. And these people are going through exactly what Tianna told you she's experiencing right now. And the way we win that is at jury trial. The way that we protect our civil rights leaders is by either acquitting them or getting a mistrial, which is when 1 juror out of 12 votes in favor of the person who's being prosecuted. To illustrate some of the problems with this, I want to tell you a story. It's got nothing to do with Tianna, and it has everything to do with Tianna. I want you to imagine that you're a 22-year-old young Black man named Deontay Wright. You're from Indiana. You have a disabled brother, a single mom. You work at Pack and Save. In summers, you work extra, helping your mom at her job. You're a junior college football player, and you want to get ahead. You can't get ahead. So you decide to pool your money because you've heard in California, you can go out there and you can buy large quantities of the best marijuana in the country. And you can go back to Indiana and you could sell it to your friends and you could supplement your income and make an extra 10 grand a year. You talk to 3 of your friends. One of them was on a football scholarship, hurt his back. He's not doing well. And you all decide you're going to pull $15,000 cash. And you're going to rent a car and you're going to drive to California. You're going to have some fun. You're going to do your college assignments along the way with your laptop. And your friend that was a football player who's injured decides to borrow a handgun because buying marijuana is dangerous. Never being in California and not knowing what you're getting into could be dangerous. Your life savings is in that car, and you drive to Northern California, a place that looks much different than Cal State, San Bernardino or Southern California, in the middle of nowhere, and you find a guy that says that he's got marijuana at a house and he's gonna sell it to you. You give this guy $15,000, you drive miles and miles through the woods to a cul-de-sac. That guy gets out, he goes in the house, he comes out and he doesn't have your money and he tells you, sorry, you're screwed. And you drive away and you don't have any more money and this opportunity just went south and all you want is that $15,000 worth of marijuana that you came for. You take that gun, you drive your friends back to that house and you give them that gun, you tell them to go back in and get the marijuana, nothing else. Not your money, not anything extra. And they do that. And a couple miles later, you make the unfortunate mistake of driving while Black in a place where there's no Black people, let alone 3 or 4 of them in a brand new Jeep. And a police officer pulls in behind you and you're Deontay and you panic and you run. You crash your car, everyone's arrested. Deontay was charged with kidnapping to commit robbery, 3 counts, and a bunch of other stuff. And he's now facing life in prison ×3. This young dad who was just trying to get ahead took a risk, and now he's sitting next to me in a courtroom in Mendocino County with white bailiffs with guns, a white judge, a white attorney, a white prosecutor, in a courtroom full of all white people who might be on that jury. 12 of them is what we're going to pick. And we're sitting there and Deontay's in a suit that doesn't fit him well because we had to deliver it to him in the jail. He couldn't try it on. He's got this device on his knee that prevents him from moving it quickly should he escape, that will prevent him from walking quickly. and they shackle him into his chair, and he's watching me pick a jury. And I lean over and I tell Deontay, all we need to keep you out of prison for life is one juror. And Deontay's like, okay, one juror, that's all we need. And juror after juror sit in the chair, and we ask them questions to see if they can be fair, and we ask them questions about what they do. And jury selection's going kind of like this. The district attorney says, ma'am, in seat number 9, you're Mrs. Smith. Was it your granddad, the one that owned the farm down on 43rd that had the really good pomegranates? Well, yes, sir. That was my grandfather. Yeah, that's my family's farm. I live there still. Wow, is your granddad still alive? No, he passed. My condolences. Hey, listen, you noticed that Mr. Wright's black. Is there anything that would keep you from giving him a fair trial or listening to the evidence? Well, no, sir, not at all. I can be totally fair. This is juror after juror in this small town courtroom. And one juror in the corner said she was a holistic medicine doctor. She's got kind of long curly hair, no makeup on, glasses. And she's looking at Deontay with these really warm eyes, and she's the only one that will make consistent eye contact with Deontay. And Deontay's nudging me. That's the juror. That's the juror. That's the one. I have a feeling. And I trusted his feeling because I had it too. And she raises her hand suddenly and she says, Judge, can I say something? The judge says, well, it's not really time for you to speak. I've really got to say something, Judge. It's important. And I notice her micro expression, she's twitching a little bit. She seems very troubled. She's trembling. The judge says, go ahead, ma'am. Do you want to say it in front of everybody? She says, yes. As a matter of fact, I wrote my thoughts down on a piece of paper. She starts to outline an indictment of the United States justice system, Jim Crow. She's talking about the disproportionate prosecution and sentencing of young African Americans for the war on drugs. She's talking about life's chances. She's talking about privilege, and she's telling Deontay's story, and Deontay is nudging me, and he's like, yes, yes, this woman will hear me. This woman will let me get on the stand and hear my story and understand me. It's not a guarantee, but she's the one. And as this lady gets done reading this letter that she wrote to the court, and the tears are streaming down her face, and she's just broken at the thought of serving on this jury, she finishes the letter and says, and Judge, that's why I can't just be put in a position where I'm asked to render a verdict against this young man. Deontay's heart hit the floor. My heart hit the floor. Our one juror that might just understand where Deontay came from just got herself kicked off the jury. And that's why I put together this presentation. That moment really struck me, because here is a woman who was doing everything she could that she thought was right. And she would have likely been the most fair juror. She would have likely been the one that really listened. She might have been the one that believed Deontay's testimony that he wasn't there to rob anybody over the white people who testified that they didn't rob him. And in courtrooms all across the country, all the time, there's some well-meaning person who doesn't understand what's at stake or how their role interplays with what's at stake. And they get themselves kicked off these juries. And that's a problem. But with Black Lives Matter cases and with civil rights cases, it's really important to understand that you don't have to do that. That's not necessarily true in a courtroom, what you're saying about your opinion and beliefs, and that cops are bad and you can't believe them, and that you're biased against cops, that's not necessarily what's effective, because the jury selection process is biased towards people who are racist. It's biased towards institutional racism. And that's what we need to stop. And that's the opportunity we have. If we can get people to want to go to jury duty, if we can get people to understand that the law does not ever make you render an unjust verdict in your heart and in your mind, that that's not the way the law works, we can win a lot more cases. We can get a lot more control. This could happen in every county. It could be replicated in every state, and it could be nationwide. And we can make a massive difference, but it's never talked about. It's never discussed. There's some technical reasons why. There's some ethical gray areas for attorneys to talk like this. I don't believe I am in a gray area. I believe that I'm squarely within my ethical duties to tell you about this, because I've seen so many jurors who could be fair get themselves kicked off. So that's what I'm here to do today. That's what Tianna is here to do if she's still with us. She's going to be at trial. She's going to be at trial in a very conservative county. And I expect the jury selection could be like it was for Mr. Wright. And I want people to know, I want them to understand what to expect. And this isn't a presentation or a lecture about the details. It's a starting point. It's a starting point to start the discussion. For those of you interested in organizing, it's a reason why we need to make sure that people understand how to be selected, how to even get the jury duty slip, how to get that mailed to your house, what a privilege it is to be able to sit on a jury if you can, especially for retired people, people that are maybe disabled but can sit through the jury trials, people of color, people who maybe are white but who have obtained an education and understand what's at play. So that's kind of what this is. This is the beginning of that discussion. Over the next couple of years, in my opinion, this is something that we should all focus on. And so I kind of wanted to wrap up the formal structured discussion with that and turn it over to everybody for questions. For, Tianna and I are here to talk to you about anything. I guess we'll talk to see what Professor Teixeira would like us to address first, or Mr. Futch, what you would like us to address, and then we can start taking questions from the audience.
Thank you. That was wonderful, both of you. I think I just want some more details, and especially in terms of our students, Curtis. How did you find yourself? Did you just fall into civil rights work, or what was that process like for you?
I felt so guilty, at the time period of my life when I was at Cal State University, San Bernardino. I felt a tremendous amount of guilt because people of color that I was really close with, they took plea bargains, and I didn't have to take those types of plea bargains, and they went to prison. And this may seem like a long way to get to answer your question. However, what was equally disappointing about all of the law enforcement misconduct that I saw when I was in my life of crime was that I had hope, and I was inspired that I could transcend my criminal prosecution. I had a family. My family's had privilege. My family's very fortunate and blessed, and a lot of things came into play, but I was just generally really heartbroken when friends of mine would say, look, I'll go to prison for 3 years. I'll clean up from my drug problem. I'll read the Bible. And I realized that they didn't feel like they could succeed outside. And so what I carried forward once I decided I could become a lawyer is I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney because I wanted to give back the opportunity that was given to me. I wanted to help inspire people and get them a second chance, regardless of whether they did what they're accused of or not. And pretty quickly, I saw that there was a huge need for civil rights. Civil rights is unfortunately, it's a very economical from the lawyer standpoint. A lot of civil rights attorneys, they get money. That's how they solve problems. And I wanted to do civil rights. I obviously need to pay my bills, but I wanted to do civil rights in a way that we could do cause lawyering or guerrilla warfare, guerrilla lawyering. And that involves holding public officials accountable, having a high profile, using the media. And so that led me to civil rights, which I find very rewarding because sometimes I'm not excited about the cases I have in the criminal courts. Not all of them have these same elements of injustice. Some of them just, they suck. They're really bad, situations that people are in. And I get a lot more out of the civil rights side of it. So a couple of years ago, I teamed up with a friend of mine and we decided to start doing civil rights. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does, Curtis. My follow-up is, how did you and Tianna find each other?
Probably another phenomenon we'll never completely understand. But when COVID happened, my business was devastated because I go to court and there was no court. So I had a couple months where I was kind of sitting around and I was watching everything happen with the George Floyd situation. And I was really upset. I've represented a lot of protesters in the past. I always do it pro bono. And I just represented about 20 in Alameda County, Black Lives Matter protesters. By the way, very few of them were people of color. It was really exciting to see a lot of white people stepping up, taking chances, getting arrested, taking a stand. And I've never had any protesters where I couldn't get the case dismissed. And Tianna's uncle, who she mentioned from San Francisco, and his wife knew about me, and we had a social relationship. And so they asked if I might be able to help with this case. And I immediately knew this was the case I wanted. Once I spoke to Tianna, I just knew that this was the case where I belonged. I think that she was, divinely called on to be the person she is today and to be in this position. And I wanted to serve that cause and serve her. And since then, a bunch of other attorneys who are equally committed and amazing jumped on the case to assist. So that's how we met.
Fantastic. Stan, did you have a question? There's a question in the Q&A, a couple of questions, but I'll give Stan a moment to ask anything he wants to ask.
Yeah, Tianna, I just commend you for doing so much activist work at such a young age. You put in a lot of years for such a young person. And I hate to say this, but in activism work, you're going to be in this situation again. It's always a fight. And that's, we fight for what we think is the right thing. And Curtis, on your part, I don't know if you remember this or not, but in the late 90s in New York, what happened in the courtrooms was just amazing. Black jurors started just dropping cases of drug charges on Black suspects, guilty or not. They just took a stand. They said, we know what's happening with white suspects, but we're not going to put up with it anymore. And they literally started just, didn't matter how bad the case was, if it was for personal use, he was innocent. And so I think you're right. I think the jury duty is a powerful, powerful tool. However, I know I've served jury duty, and I was on a case that an old Black man shot a gangbanger. And it could have been self-defense, but it didn't sound like it was. It sounded like he was just tired. And he shot a gangbanger. And so I was in the jury box and they asking questions. And I made it right down to the end. But it was very clear that me as an older gentleman was not going to be on that jury. They were not going to have me on that jury because I would have understood. You know, my state of mind might have been the same as his state of mind. But that's one of the tough things for a lawyer, because that one person, you want him on that jury, but it's not easy to get him on that jury. And on the case that you're dealing with, I just want to ask this question. Freedom of speech, is that one of the items that you're battling?
I think at its essence, that's what we're battling. But problem is, lawyers have made things very technical, and there's all these layers that have evolved. So the law's evolved to where freedom of speech is actually very limited. And so in this case, freedom of speech may not be a defense because of the way they charged her. They charged her with things like false imprisonment, like stopping a car because traffic was stopped. You have a right to freedom of speech, but you don't have a right to stop traffic. I think that's kind of clear. So they spent their time kind of distilling this down into things where freedom of speech wouldn't necessarily be a legal defense, but freedom of speech certainly can be something that's really important to jurors that we can strike a chord with to get them to see things our way. And ultimately a juror may believe, and that may be a defense that we have, is, hey, this was freedom of speech, and it's the juror's idea to determine whether this was freedom of speech or stopping traffic illegally. And that's actually a really good example of why it's so important that we get on the jury, right? Because there's no right or wrong answer under the law. If a juror thinks she was expressing her speech and that that's the type of speech that should be protected, then that's going to be bigger in their mind than stopping that traffic, and she's going to get acquitted. And that's why we have to have open-minded people, or people that value free speech. Not everybody does value that these days. So that's the answer to your question. I wanted to comment. Thank you for bringing up what happened in New York. What a fantastic example of community organizing at the level of jurors. This people don't understand. I've made it sound kind of easy, but it is so hard to be one person in a courtroom. You've been around 12 or 11 other jurors, maybe for months in a case, talking about their kids, talking about life. This judge sits 10 or 15 feet higher than everybody else with a robe. They look intimidating. They sound like they know everything. I mean, the courtroom alone in many cases is $1 million worth of varnished wood and decor. And just to get from your car into the courtroom as a juror, you're walking into oftentimes $100 million building or more with marble everywhere. I mean, it's so elegant. It's so rich. And what are those courtrooms? Those courtrooms were not built to set people free. And that weight will weigh on individual jurors. That is so intimidating. And then you have to worry, you have to talk about all these legal terms that lawyers don't even understand. And I'm confused half the time, and I went to law school and this is what I do. So what I'm talking about is not that easy. It takes a really, really strong stomach for intimidation. And I see people of color all the time that seem to be intimidated and go the other direction because of that intimidation and fear. So it's really something that has to be done on the broad level, the community level. And maybe there should be some legislative change that mandates a particular cross-section of jurors, because an all-white juror, most trials are people of color, and most jurors and jury pools are almost all white.
Yeah, Curtis, we got a question. It says, thank you both for sharing your experience and knowledge. Is there a way to check that your information and contact address is up to date for the jury pool to which you belong? So is there a way that
in
people
short,
can check to see if
I do not know, because it could vary from county to county. Counties generally dictate their process for jury service. Usually, there's DMV registration where you can opt to be a juror, or there's registered voting registration where that will put you in the jury pool. But it varies from county to county, so it's something that I would have to look up, or that's something that you could probably look up as well. And also, I want to be distinct that every county could be different, and every state could be different. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know in my town it's voter registration. So if you're registered to vote, you're registered for the jury duty. Tianna, give us a little bit of more background on San Luis Obispo, because I've been to SLO many times, and it's a great vacation place, but I don't live there. And so what people need to know is really not only the makeup, but the fact that if it wasn't a college up there, it would be a whole different place. So give us a little bit of makeup on San Luis Obispo.
Okay, so San Luis Obispo, it's very affluent. Like, people are pretty wealthy. It's just as expensive to live in SLO as it is to live in Oakland, or it is to live in LA, Long Beach. But there's none of the same drive. So it is basically a white sanctuary. The college is there, and that does bring some more liberals, but the college is Cal Poly, and it's an agriculture school. So it brings in a lot of conservative young farmer white people. So like they just attract each other. People in SLO, they have not been exposed to the real world, honestly. And I think that's why they've had such an issue with me, because most of the people who live there, they have grown up there. The only reason I moved there is because my mom actually went to high school in SLO, so it was her hometown. But the majority of the people, they stay inside of their bubble and they love it. They love to not be exposed to people of color, and people of color who truly embrace their color, because a lot of times people of color in SLO, Black, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, etc., they try and fit in with the dominant mainstream culture, because you are literally invisible, basically, if you don't. And so that's really difficult. So you see a lot of people trying to assimilate and trying to have the same like goals or lifestyle as the dominant white culture. And it's very, honestly, I think it's a horrible place for people of color to live. I don't think that they can truly grow to their best potential. But SLO is just it's like you would see in a movie, just the old white town, like been there forever. Nobody really knows, like there's just a lot of wealth. People don't like to talk about their problems. And you see that like avoidance, especially with white people. But just in general, they definitely don't like to talk about racial issues. I remember I had the same job for 3 years, and on my first day of work, this older white man, my mom had came into work, and my mom was white, so people don't always assume that she's my mom. She'd come in and she was talking to one of the employees, and he turns and starts talking to me and goes, "Oh my God, she's so exotic." And my mom goes, "Well, that's my daughter. Like, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "That's your daughter? Well, I'm Will Smith." And so you just see like a lot of disconnectedness in SLO.
Thank you for that. I'm going to read another question. It says, I have heard of court hearings being moved into more conservative, often whiter communities. Why is this allowed? And on your case too, is that an option?
We intentionally chose not to do that because that's what we're afraid of. If we end up in like Tulare County or something, it could be worse. So there's some criteria that courts use, and it's demographic related. But you have to keep in mind, normally we're dealing with a judge who's so heavily incorporated institutional racism into their persona, and that's right. Institutional racism is so dangerous because you can be Black, a person of color. You can keep the wheels of institutional racism moving regardless of what your race is, and oftentimes regardless of what your awareness is of the issue. It's very powerful. So a lot of times judges understand that they might be sending us to a more liberal or a more sympathetic jurisdiction, and they err on the side of being a little bit more cautious because they know that if defense is asking for a change of venue, then we feel we're at a disadvantage. So they don't want to give us necessarily an advantage. That happens a lot. I'm not saying that the judge in SLO would do that, but so you end up a lot of times not where you want to be. And quite frankly, Tianna has such a great following in SLO. I do believe we can get a fair trial there. And I do believe it's the right place to try the case. But I think that was a great question because it just highlights one of the things that needs to be fixed about our system. The law is like 50, 100 years behind of the civil rights movement in many ways. That's choosing which venue is certainly one of them.
Thank you for that, Curtis. I just needed to go back to the story you told about the woman on the jury who gave her testimonial. Could she have been excluded by the prosecutor anyway, even before she made that statement? I mean, because you went into some detail in describing her, which, brings to mind, the hippies of the 1960s and 70s. And I know there are a lot of people in, Northern California who fit into that category. Could she have been excluded anyway, though?
That's a great question. So yes, to answer your question, one of the things that we get as lawyers when we're picking a jury is we get what's called a peremptory challenge. Peremptory challenge is, and to define that, let me just go back. The lady who said she couldn't be fair is what's called a cause challenge. She should be removed by the judge because she can't be fair, and that's the cause to remove her. There's a peremptory challenge, which is almost completely without justification. There are a few instances, they're very weak, where myself or the prosecutor can strike any juror, up to 10 jurors. And there's some technicalities there that I'm not going to get into, but for any reason. If I don't like the way a juror looks at my client, I can strike them without justification. Up to 10 times I can do that. If the DA, like in this case, most likely this DA was very astute. And so he might have not liked this sympathy in her eyes and struck this juror as well. So that's a problem. And let me tell you, there's frequently people of color being removed from juries solely because they're of color. And that's supposed to be against the law. But I'll tell you, because I want to be honest with you, I strike certain people of color all the time if I don't think they're going to be sympathetic to my client. And it's unfortunate that that's kind of where we're at, right? We have this beautiful system, which is the jury system, but there's some ugly leftovers that lawyers are allowed to do that don't necessarily make it, in my opinion, optimized. And that's one of them. So it's an imperfect system for sure. And that's why we need to organize on a broad level, right? Because we have to be prepared. And that's why I brought up the woman in Mendocino. She's white. And I think really what we need to do, in addition to getting people of color on jurors, is we need to be getting white people that are going to see things from a more sociological perspective onto juries. And that's why I thought she was a good example, because she really flagged herself. But a lot of times if you're this is the sad thing. If you have a PhD, you're probably going to get struck from the jury.
I have many times.
Yep. You're too smart for us.
Yeah.
That's what attorneys are afraid of, right? Because attorneys have a lot of power in their role, but attorneys are very intimidated by other people's level of intellect. They're very, especially the DA, because the DA needs a majority. The DA needs all 12. So he needs sheep. He needs sheep that will, he or she needs sheep that will follow him or her, right? And so they will select people that aren't highly educated, because highly educated people think for themselves. I don't think I've ever struck anybody for being too intelligent. That's, but I'm on the defense side, and to be honest with you, it's different. I just need one person on my side. So let a PhD tell a plumber, let them argue, you know, like, I don't know which side it's going to land, but one person on my side, my client walks. So
So I
and on the other side, I was in law enforcement, and I got picked on a jury because the person on trial was a officer of the law. And that was the craziest thing. And they, you know, the first question, they fill your questionnaire out, and I was an arson investigator, and you do all that, and you know you're gonna walk because you're in law enforcement. There's no way they're gonna pick you. And then when they picked me, I thought, you know, I raised my hand and said, you know, I'm a badge carrying officer right now. You know, that's my job right now. And they said, yeah, we know. Because they believed that I would be sympathetic to the officer.
Of course, yeah. I always thought that my time in law enforcement and my professorship would sort of balance each other out. I mean, so I was coming in as a neutral person, but I have been rejected. I have been rejected every single time on juries, every single time. And I've probably, you know, I've been a registered voter all my life, so I've probably been called in at least a dozen times or more. And it's just no way I can get on a jury, it seems.
Lawyers the same way. A lawyer is very rarely going to make it on a jury.
Yeah, exactly.
It's, and I see a question here in my chat, talks about, well, it's not a question. It talks about jury nullification. It says Radio Lab produced an episode on jury nullification several years ago. Jury nullification is a great concept. I'm talking about something a little different, but jury nullification is also important. Can
you define that?
Yeah, so a jury nullification is somehow conveying to the jury, as usually as a defense attorney, my client did it, so what, right? Finding some chord to strike with a juror, to where a juror will go against what the judge's instructions are, will go against the law and acquit the defendant anyways, or vote to acquit. So maybe just one juror will do that. It's an ethical gray area for attorneys. I believe that if I have no other defense, that I believe the status of the law requires me to pursue jury nullification, but actually, I think that's a small area. I actually think there's a better concept that applies more broadly that we can use. And, you know, it was a little detailed. I didn't want to bring it up in the first section, but since it was raised, I'll talk about it. To convict somebody, you need to find the evidence to be true against them beyond a reasonable doubt. We've all heard beyond a reasonable doubt. There's some definitions of it. And I'll tell you right now that if you can tell me what it means, I would give you my income for the rest of my life. It is subjective, right? So if you're the type of person who understands that law enforcement lies sometimes, law enforcement plants evidence, that law enforcement sometimes make mistakes, your idea that's completely undefinable to anybody else, your idea of beyond a reasonable doubt might be up here. Did the prosecution prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Tianna Arata stopped traffic? Well, in your mind, you may be so embraced or enthralled with her circumstances and what she was doing. Did she intend to do that? Maybe she just intended to speak out about George Floyd so strongly that that's up here. And the prosecution, sure, they brought in evidence that cars were stopped and that people wanted to leave and they needed to go pee and they couldn't get off a freeway. But did they establish that she intended to do that? And so in your mind, you can play with that.
Mhm.
And there's nobody that can do anything to you if you play with that concept.
Mhm.
Now, if the guy that thought that Tianna was exotic, his idea of beyond a reasonable doubt might be down here.
Mhm.
There's no test. There's no consequences for you as a juror afterwards if your idea was here and their idea was here. That doesn't exist. Attorneys stand in court and try to explain this concept to you. It's completely subjective. It escapes many people. And so you don't need jury nullification. Jury nullification would say, hey, they proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Tianna blocked traffic and that she intended to block traffic because she wanted people to sit there for 8 minutes and 47 seconds and understand what it's like not to be able to move. And the prosecution proved that she did that and intended to do it, but I'm going to vote not guilty anyways. That's jury nullification. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow for some people, but we don't need that.
Mhm.
And on the other side, when you look at what stopping traffic, if you look at the LA marches and they shut down freeways, and you ask people in those thousands and thousands of cars that got stopped, did they feel like they were being kidnapped? And the answer would probably be no. I thought there was a march going on. So when you accuse, charge someone with that, it may not be what the victim believes happened. In other words, she was protesting. He understands she was protesting, and not the guy running over people, but other people probably would understand there was some delay because they were protesting.
Excellent point. It's what happened here, actually. Several of the, that's what I was referring to in that video earlier, that one of the investigators lied. His report says he interviewed one of these people and that guy was a victim. And that guy came out afterwards and said, I never felt like a victim. But let's take it even further. If there was 100 cars on the freeway and she was standing there and they were stopped and 99 of them were honking in support of what she was doing and 99 of them were giving thumbs up, does she deserve to be convicted for the one person that wanted to get off and go pee?
Mhm.
There you go. That's my point. I agree.
Mhm.
I totally
But
agree.
on the other hand, it seems to me, and I think you guys are suggesting this, that even with, lack of evidence or lots of evidence, if I don't like people protesting, regardless of the evidence, if I don't like the fact that you get out there with your little 14-year-old self or your little 20-year-old self, instead of being in school and obeying your mommy and all that, if I don't like that, then I am going to find you guilty. I am going to say, I don't care what the evidence is, she's guilty.
Yeah, it's jury nullification the other direction.
Yeah, in the other direction. Right.
And Tianna, I know that you have some experiences with people lashing out. Do you want to talk about, what kind of juror you're afraid is going to get on that jury?
Yeah, I'm afraid of the general white male population of SLO who already hates me. Like, I have become, first of all, such a target in SLO specifically. Like, I literally had so many death threats. I was forced to move towns or move out of town. And I'm just worried that some old white man who doesn't understand, who is upset whenever he sees Black people standing up for something, is going to get on that jury and he's not going to be taken off. Because it's also like, there's no way around the fact that people have implicit bias, especially towards Black people, especially in the United States. And so I know every single juror is going to have implicit bias, but how much do they try and work through it is what I'm concerned with.
And that's the job of the attorney, right? To have them sort of examine their biases, or no, Curtis? Is that an inappropriate question to ask a juror?
A lot of attorneys feel that that should be addressed head on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I address that head on. I haven't had good luck because I feel that most people maybe I'm biased, but most people lie, especially when they're slanted against it's so okay
Especially
to
when
be
you're talking about
slanted.
racism.
What was that?
I said, especially when you're talking about racism. Nobody wants to
Oh
be
yeah,
racist.
yeah.
Nobody wants to admit that they have
I'm
bias.
not a racist. No, no.
Yeah. So,
When I taught diversity, and one of the issues in diversity was, my class was actually forced on the fire department that I was working with, and they were forced to be in the class. And the first thing they wanted to know was, why do I have to even be here?
Yeah.
And that's already a negative. But then their second response is, I've never felt any racism. Well, of course you haven't. You're white. You're white. And so of course you haven't.
Yeah.
But they can't, it doesn't click. And
That's why I don't teach those
that's a
classes
tough one
anymore.
for lawyers, for teachers, for Black males, Black females. I mean, Tianna went through the whole thing, LGBTQ, and the whole thing. Everyone, when you see somebody who's different, it clicks, and you are who you are.
Yeah.
there's one thing that I think might be interesting. So, Dr. Teixeira, you brought up a good point. Aren't we as lawyers supposed to ferret out people that have bias? Well, one, we're limited to how effective we can be, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. And we've talked about them, honesty and whether people are going to be honest. But the wolf in the sheep's clothing when it comes to institutional racism, I'll tell you right now, is the criminal defense attorney. There are a lot of great attorneys out there, and there's a lot of true believers, but the attorneys who are impacted by institutional racism are few and far between. And so that's who you're trusting to ferret out who has bias, right? A criminal defense attorney, who is their client? Oftentimes people of color, usually males. A career of that, you don't turn over the same stones that you used to. And an example of that is I represent California's he was California's longest serving death row inmate. He's a Native American. He was prosecuted in Fresno in 1978. We've gotten him off death row. Now we're trying to get him out of prison. The evidence was completely fabricated. The gun, the supposed murder weapon that he was supposedly caught with has the lead homicide's detective's initialed and a date that predates the murder 5 years. So that homicide detective somehow had that gun and booked it into evidence 5 years before the murder ever happened. I'm not a rocket scientist. My client asked me to go look at the weapon because he said there's no way this could be true. I drove to Fresno, my team looked, I said, Jesus, there's this guy's initials engraved on here. And then it triggered a whole bunch of other obvious things. Doesn't take a detective to see how they set him up. It was really obvious. And he had 18 state-appointed criminal defense attorneys from 1978 till we took the case. And we're not part of that 18. There's like 5 attorneys on my team that we've had it for 4 years, and we'll probably get them out in the next year or two. Who let them down? These attorneys. Why? They didn't choose to believe that a cop might have lied and this young Native American was telling the truth.
Yeah, Tianna, I wish you all the luck. I hope you get off on your case, and when you do, think about this. San Luis Obispo needs you. And the truth is that the places that you can do the most good are the places that you truly
do the most.
That's right. And I don't. You mentioned Tulare County, Curtis, and my wife worked for an assembly member, one of our local assembly members, Wilmarina Carter, and there's a place there called Allensworth. And Allensworth is a Black settlement, and it's history. It's history at its best. And anyway, what was happening to Allensworth is they were building farms because it's Tulare County. It's a farm area. And they were building farms around this Allensworth, this township.
Which is a traditionally Black town. It was an all Black town.
All Black town.
the early 20s, I think. Was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have relatives that actually attended school there. But anyway, they were building farms and they were closing in on this township. So her assembly member made it a national park and also got them to stop, to not be able to build the farm area within so many feet. It was huge, but the kickback and the fight was tremendous because it's a white community and farmers rule the nest.
Yeah, next week we're going to have a discussion of Sundown Towns, and so I think that's a great segue. Allentown was obviously the opposite of a sundown town, but these are, sorry, my dogs. These are communities that, you could not let the sun go down with your being in these all white communities. And headline breaking news, they were not all in the South. We've got a lot of sundown towns in Oregon, Northern California, Iowa, Idaho, places like that. So, this idea of all of these problems being in the South is just a myth. Curtis, I think we need to get your contact information. Can you put that in the chat?
Sure, in the webinar chat.
Yeah, just in the chat section at the bottom, if you can just put in the name of your firm as well as contact information, because I'm sure there will be some people. We are, we don't have a huge audience today, but we're posting this online, and it'll be available to certainly my 300 students next quarter. I'm going to have them take a look at this discussion today, and it'll be there in perpetuity. So we would love to get your information. That would be great.
So yeah, put my Instagram if you want to see pictures of my cat occasionally.
Okay, so yeah, I'm pulling that up now.
My email, my cat is my paralegal. I have a little suit and tie for him. I occasionally put him in.
Okay.
COVID's done a lot to me psychologically.
It has, yeah. We've gotten really close to our animals during the whole COVID thing. I see that your mother, is it your mother who's in our audience?
Is she? Yeah.
Briggs, Judy Briggs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
And we want to thank her for raising such a wonderful son and handing him over to me, and then I handed him over to the world. So there you go. It's a circle of life. Hello.
She appreciates it. She has two other amazing sons too. So.
That's great. That's great. Well, we want to thank you all.
Before that, Mary, Tianna, before we go, could you give some encouraging words to other activists that are out there that are trying to make a difference? Just, like you said, you want to, what was the word, you inspire and empower. So could you give a few words to another young person out there that might want to do what you're doing?
And maybe she can incorporate her answer with the final question in the Q&A section, which is, Tianna, what do you want to do in the next few years? How are you hoping this very publicized trial will change the movement for Black lives? Which is a great question to end on. Yes.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. In the next few years, I have gotten acquainted with some other youth organizers and activists across the country, and they have all started their own foundations or their own organizations, and they're all like 18 to 20 to maybe 21 years old. So that's definitely in the works next. I want to continue. I want to beat this case and continue to be out and protest and really get people involved, because I feel like personally, I can be a magnetic person, and I'm not always like my but my alleyway isn't necessarily educating folks. Like, everybody has a different role in the revolution. So I want to be able to continue to use my gifts in the best way, in the best possibility that I can, and not be criminalized for it. And how am I hoping that this very publicized trial will change the movement for Black lives? Hopefully people like who are following my case and my trial can see, I don't know, the issue of racism in really small towns, and that California is not exempt from racism, no matter how many laid back people we have here. I think like it can really show like there is inherent and implicit bias everywhere. There's anti-Blackness everywhere. And hopefully people can really dive down and see this is happening in small towns all across the country. Like, it's not just me, it's not just free Tianna, it's free all political prisoners. So hopefully this can kind of like, the magnifying glass on me can expand people's knowledge of everywhere.
Great, great. The last thing I would want to add in terms of good news is, I don't know if you've heard, Curtis, about reopening the case of Oscar Grant. The Alameda County DA is Oscar Grant. If anyone saw Fruitvale Station with the sexiest man alive, whose name actually escapes me right now. But yeah, he's on the cover of People magazine. Anyway, he starred in the story of Oscar Grant being killed by transit cops. And so we're very, very pleased to hear that and I think it's in the wake of Black Lives Matter that they are reopening his case. So, and
there's a lot to be said for Kamala Harris moving up. A lot of people that are within her sphere want to be accountable when they haven't been accountable in the past, and that's what happened in Alameda. I'm about, as we stand right now, I'm about 5 miles from Fruitvale Station.
Are you? Yeah, yeah. Which is a subway stop, and he was on the subway, celebrating New Year's Eve, and he gets unarmed. He is killed by a transit police officer. So we hope there's a good outcome to that case because it's been a long time brewing, his death. Any closing statements, you all?
I would like to just say to the students and the faculty of CSUSB, you make me proud. You fundamentally shaped my education and empowered me to community organize. And because of everything that you gave me, I was able to do my job a certain way that's allowed me to help people. And I just want to encourage you during these really difficult times in a Zoom world to keep doing what you're doing. You can make it, and you can make a big difference. And you're making a big difference just by showing up. If there's anything I can do for you, my email and my Instagram handle are in the chat.
And you've done quite a bit already, Curtis. You've made us proud too. So thank you very much. And the best of luck to you, Tianna. You're in good hands.
Thank you. I really am.
Yeah, you're in really good hands. So we'll talk soon. The next time you guys are in Southern California, we owe you lunch and, an adult drink or whatever.
Sounds good.
Please look us up.
Happy holidays, everyone.
One more year.
You
see one more year.
Bye, everyone. We'll
Bye.
see you soon.
Bye-bye. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thank you.
Be safe. Be safe. Bye-bye.